Greetings everyone. Welcome to CAC Gurukul lecture. In today's lecture, I would be discussing textual tradition and the concept of pativratization. In this, we would be discussing how the texts like Vedic Griha Sutras, Dharma Sutras, Arthashastra, Manusmriti, Jatakas and Kam Sutra were utilized for the construction of can be utilized by a historian for the construction of the social history of early India. An attempt has been made by several scholars in this regard, like Kumkum Roy, who has described as to how to use the textual tradition to bring about a more gender sensitive history of the past. The several sources can be used to explore the tensions of caste, class and gender in understanding hierarchies that existed in the society in the past. While this kind of a description was absent both in Orientalist historiography as well as in nationalist historiography, these kind of studies have made their mark in the feminist genre of scholarship. So, Kumkum Roy has described as to how the Griha Sutras as well as the various Brahmanical sources projected a patriarchal view of marriage which was concerned solely with domesticating the wife. So, the historians have traced how women were suffering through the patriarchal ideology of Pativrata Dharam, which was however projected as something that would bring about nirvana to them and moksha to them. This evolution of the concept of ideal wife can be traced to the Vedic literature like the Vedas. The Rig Veda and the Griha Sutras do not enforce much obedience upon the wife, but by the time of later Vedic period and literature, for example the Smritis, the status of wife was considerably lowered and the ideal of a docile obedient wife came to be idealized and symbolized the glory of Indian culture. So, one needs to analyze the epics from this standpoint as to how a systematic ideology of Pativrata Dharam can be traced in a number of stories and fables that are mentioned in these epics. So, one can talk in detail about several epic stories like Mahabharata. One incident that has been described is that of Kunti, that how she blessed the bride Draupadi that she may be virtuous and devoted to her husbands, that is, she should be a pativrata as also a wife at their sacrifice, which means yajna patni, and also a mother of living and brave sons, that is Jiva Sura Virasu. So, Shalini Shah has described how in the course of various fables and mythologies that were emerging and which became part of the literary tradition of Mahabharata, there was a systematic ideology of pativratization that was emerging. The transition of wife from patni to a mere pativrata was most apparent in the portrayal of the character of Draupadi. So, while it is largely believed that Draupadi was far more liberal in her outlook and she was a bolder woman as compared to several other epic heroines, but on closer scrutiny, if we kind of dissect the various dialogues of Draupadi with Satyabhama, there emerges again a very traditional and an orthodox kind of description of the Pativrata Dharam and who is an ideal woman. So, Draupadi states, to live under the husband's protection is the eternal law, which means Sanatan Dharam for women. The husband is God, he is the only refuge. So, what woman could displease him? So, these were the lines that were uttered by Draupadi. Then, elsewhere, the discussion between Markandeya and Yudhishthir. So, Markandeya tells Yudhishthir that a devoted wife will always eat the leftovers from her husband's plate. And Kapota mentioned in the Shanti Parv about his wife, that how his wife was an ideal Pativrata. Why? Because she never ate before feeding him, and she never took bath or slept before he had done so. So, at another place, the text stated, one who keeps smiling even when rebuked by a husband is a true Pativrata. Then Kapot went a step further and mentioned that a woman was not a woman whose husband was not content with her. So, it was the duty of a wife to keep her husband content and satisfied, and only then she could be called a woman. Then elsewhere in Aranyaka Parv, Yudhishthira's losing Draupadi in a game of dice could not be used by Draupadi to rebuke Yudhishthir, because after all she was a Pativrata. So, she had to accept the fate. So, the whole idea that was generated and which emerges out of such discourses was the negation of individuality. So, a Pativrata Nari had to eat, drink and wear clothes and perform religious rites according to her husband's taste, and a woman had no sacrifice or shraddh ordained for them or for their own moksha. So, the ideal place for a woman was the Patilok. Now, Mahabharata again spoke of a special world, that was the Patilok, which was to be a Pativrata's destiny, where they were to reap the rewards for their lifelong obedient service. And gradually it was the Patilok only that was to lead them to heaven. So, elsewhere Sandil stressed that a woman earned her place in heaven, that is Devlok, by being a good wife in Patilok. So, Patilok was this worldly, and where if a woman conducts herself well, then she had all the chances of going to Devlok. And a woman, simply by wearing the orange robes of a renunciate or wearing the bark garments of a hermit, could not think of going to Devlok. So, therefore, for women, if they wanted salvation, if they wanted moksha, then they had to prove themselves as ideal wives. And unlike men who could become an ascetic and who could completely change their path of lives, and they could think of attaining heaven by following that path of religiosity, the same was not true for women. So, for women there had to be a successful endeavor in Patilok to enter Devlok. Then another instance that can be shared was that of Savitri, who came to be projected as the ideal Pativrata. So, the Aranyaka Parv mentioned about Savitri's several virtues like affection, self-control, her services towards all in the family, and looking after the physical comforts, worshipping the in-laws as God, and also her sweet nature by which she used to delight her husband. Then talking about Anushasan Parv, here one can talk about Urna's discourse on Pativrata Dharma. The saying goes like this: one who gets up early in the morning, cleans the house, prepares food for guests and family members, and after feeding them eats the leftovers, she is a true sati. So, one can well imagine that how just by being a maid servant of the house and just by being like a footmat, a woman could become a true sati, and this ideology was repeated time and again. So the whole notion was that of being a complete surrender, of doing complete surrender. A pativrata could not doubt her husband's intentions either in thought or in speech or in actions, and she had to toe whatever her husband would be telling her. So one can say that a pativrata was to be her husband's exclusive and uncomplaining and ever compromising maid, and that was her true identity. So Anushasan Parv again says, lays lot of emphasis on obeying commands, and here there was a story of Oghavati that was discussed. So Oghavati was again a woman of evil mentality, and she provides sexual hospitality to a disguised guest on the order of her husband. Okay, so though Oghavati was not a wife of evil mentality, she was a dutiful wife, she was ever obedient, but her husband ordered her to enter into sexual intercourse with a guest, but this was well appreciated because this was done on the order and command of her husband. So she is spoken of as a sadhvi and as a pavitra, because after all she was following the directions of her husband. Then there was also the notion of purity of patrilineage, that is the conformist versus the defiant woman, that was gradually built up, that was gradually ingrained. So Sandil says, I have never stood in front of my doorway or talked to anyone. What is the logic behind this? The logic is that women need to be homebound. They are not for public display, and they are not expected to speak to strangers. Then Draupadi also advises Satyabhama not to wait in isolation even on her grown-up sons, because after all grown-up sons have that masculine characteristic, and you never know the kind of ideas that can come in their mind. So an ideal woman needs to guard herself from any kind of evil eye. So the division of women into conformist and deviant women was very well attempted in Mahabharata through various stories and fables. Now coming to the whole concept of chastity, those who were not attached to one man but were free for all men were considered as evil, and the notion of respectable women and emphasis on chastity was attempted time and again. So a pativrata was one who, apart from her husband, does not even look at the anything which has masculine names, even if they are heavenly bodies like the sun or the moon and the trees. Even they should not be looked at. Why? Because they have masculine names, so they can corrupt a woman's purity. So then in Santi Parv, the newly widowed Kapoti mentioned, without you, dear husband, what is the purpose of my life? And then she jumped into the fire. So basically sati was considered as the ideal path for a pativrata. Now the whole debate on women and gender in ancient Indian texts has been discussed by scholars like Ruth Vinita. So according to Ruth Vinita, neither the popular nor the scholarly debate in modern India has paid sufficient attention to the existence of unmarried learned women in ancient Hindu texts. Ruth Vinita is an Indian academic, an activist and an author who has specialized in British and Indian literary history with a focus on gender and sexuality studies. She examined the recurrent figure of Sulabha, who was a single woman and an intellectual renunciant. So, in her analysis, Ruth Vinita has focused on a debate that Sulabha had with the philosopher King Janaka in the epic Mahabharata. Now, as we go deeper into the debate, let us talk about Sulabha, the philosopher. So, Sulabha has been projected as having different qualities, like Sulabha the philosopher, Sulabha the debater, and Sulabha the victor in this debate. So, if we talk about Sulabha the philosopher, when Janaka uses anti-women arguments to criticize Sulabha's unconventional behavior, then Sulabha successfully established on the basis of Hindu philosophical principles that there is no essential difference between a man and a woman. At the end of the day, it is the soul that matters. So, this was Sulabha's logic. Then Sulabha also demonstrated by her own example that a woman may achieve liberation by the same means as a man. So, it was not important for a woman to essentially follow the path of a householder in order to achieve salvation, something which Janaka was claiming. Now, in the same epic, a married woman wins her debate with a male sage, proving that even a woman following the conventional path of wifely devotion may equal or outdo a sage in wisdom and virtue. So, therefore, there are both kinds of women who were renunciates and those who were married, and they had a mind of their own and they had the ability to challenge the wisdom of the sages. Now, coming back to Sulabha, the wise woman, an intellectual, a renunciant who debated with the philosopher King Janaka in the epic Mahabharata, defended herself very well. When Janaka used comments that kind of displeased or that kind of disrespected the image of women, Sulabha was able to defend herself well. So, she tried to establish on the basis of philosophy and that too Hindu philosophical principles, that there was no essential difference between a male and a female, and a debate about gender, specifically whether a woman can be autonomous and can be a man's intellectual equal or superior, can attain emancipation, independently emerged. She demonstrated by her own example that she had the ability to debate with a male stage. Then there also were a series of instances of single women in the Rig Veda Samhita dated 1500 BCE. For example, the goddess Vak had no consort, and Saraswati too is worshipped without a consort in most of the traditions. So, Sulabha, by becoming an ascetic, opted out of social institutions like marriage, caste, community, family. And in early India, celibacy and learning were conceived of as options for very few women who might manage to define themselves as exceptional. So, Janaka argues with Sulabha that she has no tendency, she does not show any tendency of an ascetic, because she is delicate, young, shapely, youthful, attractive. So, therefore, a young and beautiful woman is incapable of overcoming her desires according to Janaka. And Janaka argued that the power of kings consists in sovereignty, the power of Brahmanas in the Vedas, and the power of women in their beauty, youth, marital blessedness, and hence never try to deceive a king, a Brahman, or a good wife. So, here we see that Janaka was throughout doubting the abilities and the capabilities of Sulabha, simply because she was young and attractive, and he thought that she is probably some kind of a spy who has been sent to debate with him. And why is she not married? Because she has all the qualities of beauty, youth, and attraction. So she should rather be a married woman rather than a recluse, rather than someone who was out there questioning or discoursing with Janaka. So there are very specific gender perceptions of Janak's discourse. He defines a woman by her ties to men. Janaka believes that a woman always belongs to a man, either a father or a husband or a son. And he also says that if she does not belong to one man, then she is a wicked woman who cannot be trusted, as she may unite with any other force and get activated by lust, or she might also act as a spy for a king and deceive other kings in due course of time. So therefore, throughout this discourse, Janak keeps on repeating that how it is so unusual for someone like Sulabha not to be married. So in course of time, Sulabha's discourse engages Janaka, and she says that the self is not gendered. Such a beautiful statement and such a meaningful statement, that the self, that is the Atma, is not gendered. It has nothing to do with being a male or a female, since the same Atma animates both women and men. Women are capable of pursuing the same paths as men. A truly wise person who has realized the oneness of the Atma will not try to judge anyone, including any other woman, by caste or by marital status. So therefore, Sulabha now questions the very authenticity of Janaka as a wise man, that how could he be a wise man if he does not know even such simple truth, that the self, the Atma, is not gendered. So he can very well debate with Sulabha even if she is a woman. So here emerges another character of Sulabha, that is the debater. And Sulabha's victory in the debate, that was demonstrated by Janaka's inability to answer her, justifies her own life choices. And what were the life choices of Sulabha? The life choices of Sulabha, as mentioned in the epic, were not to marry, but to wander the world alone, to seek renunciation, and also to seek emancipation by following the same path as men, and also to enter into public debate with a famous man like Janaka. So her arguments were based on the concept of oneness of the universal Atma. They apply to any woman or any man anywhere. So beautifully this discourse highlights as to how marriage was not the only option that was available to women, and there were digressions, there were exceptions, and wifely devotion as an agency also existed. But here also the emphasis by Ruth Vinita is not on studying the concept of Pativrata Dharam or the concept of studying wifely devotion as a mark of weakness of a woman's character, but as a mark of her independence, as her agency. So the debate between a married woman and Kaushika in the Mahabharata shows that women had a mind of their own. So if an ascetic woman like Sulabha could have a mind of her own, so could a woman who was married and was devoted to her husband could have a mind of her own. So the story goes like this, that an ascetic Kaushika goes on his rounds asking for alms and gets annoyed when a devoted housewife keeps him waiting while she serves her husband. So here there is a Pativrata Nari who, instead of jumping out and giving something to the ascetic because he's out there asking for alms, prefers to serve her husband first, and the ascetic gets very annoyed and he ridicules her despite her apology. So here she retorts back and she says that a true Brahman is not one who merely knows the scriptures, but rather one who has overcome anger and who sees everyone as equal. So here we see a married woman sharing her wisdom with a seer, and she is kind of telling him that what is the right way of behavior, and she has the guts to even keep him waiting. So therefore, these are some of the excerpts that were shared, and I would expect all of you to go back to the books that I have mentioned as reference material to be read, so that you also develop a broader understanding of the concept of Pativrata Dharam as to how it was built up over a period of time, and what was the role played by the textual tradition in this kind of discourse. Thank you.